One, two,
this is the Business 901 podcast, where you will find many of the leading edge thinkers in the world of continuous improvement, lean, service design, and sales and marketing. The podcast is sponsored by the Lean Marketing Lab, a learning community dedicated to developing and improving the user experience. Now, to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Bob Petruska. Bob is a well-known consultant and author of Gimbal Walks for Service Excellence. An international presenter, Bob is best known for helping teams make business impacts fast. He has a way of transitioning from ideas to practice that are really unlike anyone else in the industry. Bob, before you stepped out into the world of consulting, okay, you worked in the food processing industry.
Yep.
And can you describe the type of facilities you worked with in this industry?
The types of products we made were frozen foods. So we would start with fresh ingredients, and there would be typically like a dough process, so mixing the ingredients for making dough, and then turning that into sheets, and then cutting those and applying toppings of some sort. They might be finger foods that are like pouches or pockets or something like that you would give to your son or daughter to, feed themselves when they come home from school, for example. It's something simple they can make. But making those on a mass production basis is the process that I was working with. So there was basically, after the rolling of the product, making it, into the finger food or pizzas, for example, then it would go into an oven. It would be heated or cooked, and then it would go into a kind of a flash freezing process. And from there, it changes from a kind of a continuous process into a discrete process, because as soon as the product is, transformed from a big sheet into individual finger foods, then they had to be wrapped and then put in boxes and so on. And so there's really like three main process steps in there, and the most challenging seems to be in the end of the process, which is where the product is finished, it's already packaged, and it's going into the boxes and cases and so on, and into the freezers.
When I hear that, the first thing I picture is the old Lucy TV segment where she was doing the chocolates and they were putting them down and they were starting to... Is that how it works there?
I think it's still the same, really. Except people aren't going to eat the frozen food, but yeah, it's kind of comical in a way. Lucy's, that's a classic example of, production and the mindset of, hey, let's just turn this up and crank this dial and go faster. And to a large part, when you have very razor thin margins in industry like food, you do have to work on improving the effectiveness. So the challenge becomes, can you do it right the first time? So when I would challenge people in the food industry to take a Gimbal walk and look at the last step of your process first. And what I mean by that is look at what's coming into the freezer or the storage room or wherever it is, and then work your way backwards and look for the areas where things didn't go quite the way you wanted them to. So an example of this is if you have a production run of, let's say, 5,000 whatever products you're making, and you produce at the front end of the facility, let's say 8,000, what happens to the 3,000? Well, they can't be wrapped because you haven't bought enough containers or cardboard and all of the different things that they need to go into. So they're going to be put into bins and then brought somewhere else. Well, people think, well, that's really okay because we're going to eventually bring them back to the packaging area when we get all the cardboard and the packaging materials and run them again. But it's not okay. We should get it right the first time. So understanding and managing the flow of the process, and that means every little complex piece, is very important. Do you have all the things you need to do the job? And can you stop producing if it's a disjointed process going from mass, continuous process to a discrete process, can you stop in time? And are your incentives encouraging people to overproduce? And we talk about overproduction as the largest cause of the waste, of the 8 wastes. It results in waste of every other thing out there. All the other wastes are a result of overproduction, or can be a result of overproduction. So, it goes back to what are you asking your people to do, and are you setting them up for success? So by looking at the Gemba walk, then we walk our way back and we say, are we doing this correctly? And can we make an improvement here? And how should we improve communications across a large production process, that type of thing.
So you're saying that we really, we start at the freezer, okay, where we're storing, let's say, the packages, and that sooner we're going to walk back and we're going to find a pile somewhere, right?
Exactly. You'll find an imbalance. And, we talk about making an impact. We've got to be good at spotting the biggest problems, right? And you think it's easy, but the people working there, they're so used to the way things are, Joe. They come in every day and they do the same thing over and over. And no one really challenges it and says, hey, can we do better? Can we take a fresh set of eyes at it? So what we'll do with the Gemba walk is we will open people's eyes to the reality that there is improvements to be made. And sometimes it's shocking what people see when they finally see the reality.
I always think about lean. We kind of think that way. But one of those things that I see in the processing part is visual. Is being able to take that current state and make it visual of what's happened. Has that worked in food processing? And do you is that a way that, I think that's really the first introduction of change, is knowing what you're doing presently. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, absolutely, Joe. Understanding the current state and dealing with the reality that you currently have is the very first step. You have to, become aware of the situation before you can even address it. So that's what getting out into the Gemba really does. And we really want people to take a look at it with a fresh set of eyes. And in a way, we really want them to not only identify the constraints or those things that are bottlenecks or getting in the way, but we also want them to identify things gone right, to get a balanced perspective. Because all too often, if all we ever do is look for problems and deal with problems, it wears us out. We can't get always excited about it. But we can get excited when we look at things from a fresh setup point of view and say, wow, can we really do that differently? And what I like to do is bring in people that know nothing about the area, as one or two, and they can really get away with the really dumb questions. Why do you do it that way? And no one else that would be on the team that works on a daily basis could get away with asking that question, because they would be considered, oh, that's a dumb question. But somebody from the outside, say an accountant, they could ask a really stupid question, but then it just triggers a whole bunch of ideas like, oh, well, why do we do it that way? And it gets people, their creative juices going, because that's really what we need to do is unleash that creativity.
One of the things that I see, though, is I see that people will look at that low-hanging fruit while they're starting to develop a current state, and they'll start making changes based on that low-hanging fruit, or why are we doing this? And they quickly change, and it seems the current state starts evolving before it's ever defined. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't really share that experience so often, that people are in such a hurry. There may be some small things that get done. I'll give you an example, one that I thought was very interesting. We had a team that was just starting, and they were all excited. Hey, we've identified what we want to improve, and they had it planned, and they were going to do it the next day, and it was a simple improvement, but it was one that would reduce the amount of motion a person was going to have to take, a repetitive motion. They had to get off a forklift truck, walk over and flip a switch. And, it was a manual process, and they had a way that an idea for how to improve that. And what was funny was when the team reported out, and what they did was they brought in a cross-section of people, and that's what we love about report outs, and asked them for their ideas. Hey, what do you think about this? We're working on improving this. They have their maps, and they showed it to the people. Well, funny thing was that very night, the maintenance people on third shift went ahead and implemented the solution. So the team came in, and I walked in the room, and they were all bummed. And I'm like, whoa, why are you guys all bummed? Because you should be excited. You had a great report out last night. And they said, well, we're bummed. I said, why? Well, it got implemented last night. I go, well, that's great. And then I asked, why are you guys really bummed? He said, well, it took... we've been talking about this for 2 years, and it took us all getting together to do this. And I think that's the aha moment, is that people have to come together. And when they reach out to the people in the area and spread the ideas, things are going to happen overnight. And that's exciting to me.
What's the best way for someone to contact you and get a hold of you?
Well, my website is bobpetruska.com. Or you can send me an email at bob@bobpetruska.com. Or you can just pick up the phone and call me, 704-615-3731. If you have any questions or just want to talk or pick my brain or just make a friend, it would be great.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Bob. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 website. So thanks again, Bob.
Sure, Joe. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Visit us at theleanmarketinglab.com.